Hey David,
Yes, Luke.
Halo Infinite's been out for like nearly a year now. Have you ever played a Halo game?
I have not.
Yeah, neither have I. But you know what? I haven't been loving the Halo Infinite vibe lately. So screw Halo Infinite. I say let's play the first one.
Okay.
Anyone listening, hello and welcome. You are listening to David and Luke, and this is our first ever episode of this little project that we're starting up where we play and or talk about games.
Yeah, pretty much.
Sometimes both,
Sometimes both.
but definitely not always both. We don't always have a lot of time to
No.
play games, but I feel like we both have a lot of time to just absorb gaming news, media, and talk about games.
It feels like that.
Yes. But we don't want this to be a long intro. We're not going to do that whole, this is us, this is our journey, this is why we're doing this project. We might do a separate video about that one day, but actually, we just want to jump right into Halo and how we found Halo Combat Evolved.
Let's do it.
Recharging normally. We're showing green across the board. Bridge to Cryo 2, this is Captain Key. Send the Master Chief to the bridge immediately.
Captain, we'll have to skip the weapons diagnostics and
On the double, crewman.
Aye, aye, sir.
It's been a bit of time since since I played it. Because when did you finish the game?
A couple weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think.
Do you remember how long it took you to play the whole thing?
I don't want to know.
Okay. Fair enough.
It took me too long. It took me too bloody long. As I think I told you, some levels ended up taking me 2 hours.
Yeah.
And that's because I died.
Oh
times.
yeah. Oh yeah. No, I'm in the same
But
boat.
I just think the way I play it, I don't know how this habit came to be, but I do a lot of exploring these days. Like I sort of wander around and make sure I
interesting.
haven't missed anything.
Right.
Whereas I think a lot of other people play FPSs just by following the obvious path and taking everything out along the way.
Yeah. Follow the objectives. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
I think I was actually more in that kind of gaming sense where I was trying to just blitz it essentially. I'm kind of more like kind of unga bunga when it comes to video games. I'm not a big story kind of guy. Gameplay has always kind of been the main focus.
Yep.
So that's interesting. So you actually took your time then.
Yeah, I usually do. As I said, not sure how that habit came to be, but I just tend to do it that way.
Okay.
I'll probably just briefly touch on what made Halo back in the day. Obviously, it's from the original Xbox. It was a
Classic.
launch title for the
It
original
was, it
Xbox.
was.
Usually, launch titles are a bit rougher around the edges, or maybe they don't always live up to the hype. And actually, I'm not getting ahead of myself and saying that this game is incredible and that it's worth all the hype, but yeah, I think the fact that it's a launch title is impressive. Let's see if we've got the date. November 15, 2001 was
Oh my
the
God.
launch day.
Wow.
So
It's a long
yeah,
time.
20 years ago, and that was Microsoft's first ever console. So really, a launch title for a console, and like a launch console for a new company in the gaming industry.
Yeah. No, that's right. Yeah.
And I believe I've mentioned this to you briefly, David, and I don't think you were aware of it at the time. And I'm not sure. I think a lot of people are aware of it, but for anyone that isn't, Halo was originally going to be a Mac game. As in
Yeah, you did mention this.
Yeah, like the Apple Macintosh computer. That's what it was being made for.
That blew my mind.
Yeah.
I did not ever envision that.
It was originally revealed. The original reveal trailer or in the early gameplay footage was revealed by Steve Jobs. That's
insane.
just nuts.
Yeah, because nowadays it's so Halo is so synonymous with Microsoft and Xbox. It's just Like completely
Yeah.
mind blowing.
I mean, look at Cortana in Windows.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Where did that come from? Halo.
Oh.
Yeah. And apparently, Steve Jobs made a pretty angry phone call to. I thought it was to Bill Gates at Microsoft, but it might have actually been Steve Ballmer.
Oh, okay.
And the reason that Halo Combat Evolved ended up getting a Mac release as well was kind of as a result of this phone call,
Wow.
which it's kind of funny. Like
Yeah.
if I was Microsoft and I just spent a whole lot of money acquiring Bungie software,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be like, oh, sorry, okay, fine, we'll make sure there's a Mac version.
Yeah. But they
Yeah.
didn't do it for any other Halos, is that right?
No,
So
I'm
the
pretty sure there's
first one,
just a Mac version of Halo 1.
Combat
Yep.
Evolved. Okay. So that's the only one available. Right.
Yep. I'm reading a 9 to 5 Mac article here, and it says as soon as we announced that we'd bought Bungie, Steve Jobs called. He was mad at Steve Ballmer, phoned him up, and was angry because we'd just bought the premier Mac game developer and made them an Xbox developer. So this is someone called Ed Fries being quoted in this 9 to 5 Mac article.
Oh, okay.
He later adds, during the day, I got an email from Steve Ballmer asking me to phone Steve Jobs and calm him down about the whole thing.
Jesus.
We did this deal with Apple where we'd port some PC games to the Macintosh and help create this company to do it. And I had to go to a Mac developer conference and get on stage and talk about this whole new partnership, I guess, between Apple and Microsoft. And he says it was a pretty strange time.
I would imagine.
But I feel like we're going off track, David.
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
thought
Let's get back to the Halo, the game that we played.
Yeah. So what I want to know is, what were you expecting going into Halo? What did you think you were going to experience? Did you think you were going to like it? How did you feel before you started playing?
Oh man, that's a really good question because I think you and I chatted briefly about this before we actually sat down to play. But you and I don't have really any history with Halo. Like you and I never really played it. Well, you didn't own it. I didn't own it. So we never really kept up with the series.
And I'm suspicious of that fact, David. Like, I don't know anybody who was an Xbox gamer in their teens or whatever who didn't have Halo except for you.
Except for me. I was like the only one. Yeah,
It makes no sense
I
in
know,
my brain.
I know. Weird tangent. It'll only be a few seconds, but I got the Xbox because I wanted to play Dead or Alive 3. Because I was really into fighting games at that time. Because some of my friends, were playing like Tekken and all that stuff. But I really liked Dead or Alive, so that's why I bought an Xbox.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But yeah, you're right. Pretty much every person that we knew that had an Xbox had Halo, except for me.
Yeah.
So I guess it kind of worked out in this case because, like we said, both you and I coming into this never played Halo before, didn't have any experience. The only time we did, I think, was during our whole school excursion program thing. And it was only really just like multiplayer matches, I think, is what we played. And we didn't even play that much of it.
Yeah. Like, I've definitely actually played it, but I don't consider that to have been me sitting down and properly throwing myself into Halo. It's
that's
multiplayer
fair.
matches here and there where I probably spent at least half an hour just trying to memorize the controls and getting killed the whole time. And I think I did a bit of co-op with whoever owned the game, and I was just like, yeah, whatever. Like, I don't own the game myself. I'm not into it. This little brief stint that I play at a friend's place isn't going to change that right now.
Yeah.
I always preferred to own the games and to get into them in my own time and in my own space.
Yeah.
So,
And just to quickly add on to that, back then we were kids, we were teenagers, and we didn't really have the money to just buy a new console if we wanted to play a game.
Absolutely.
We hardly even had money to buy a new game. So,
yep.
So
I was definitely never going to be allowed to have two consoles.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I picked the GameCube. So that was my teenage console.
that's it. That's why the
And-
console wars was such a big thing, because we had to pick something.
Yeah, you couldn't just get all of them
no,
because
that's
they were
right.
all really expensive, and games themselves are really expensive.
Exactly.
So
And so even for me, who had an Xbox, I could only buy like 1 or 2 games a year. So
Yeah.
I had to pick the ones that I liked.
Yeah.
But yeah, so going into this, like I said, didn't have much experience. So I was kind of expecting a pretty typical first-person shooter. There was a lot of buzz, I think, around the time Halo first came out, kind of revolutionize first-person shooters at that time. And kind of looking back at all the kind of games that came out after, I can actually kind of see how it impacted the industry, or at least the first-person shooter genre. So I can definitely see that. So going back to it, or starting it kind of for the first time now, I was actually really interested to see how it kind of fared, or how it holds up. I won't kind of get into it too much now because we'll get to it eventually, but it was surprising, to say the least. It was different than I thought it would be, both positively and negatively, I will say. I was very excited though, so I was actually very amped going into this. So I was very looking forward to it. And I think coming out, like now that we're talking about it, I think I'm kind of still kind of towards that spectrum where I'm excited to kind of continue, like go into the next game. But I will say there were a couple of things that stood out a bit, kind of like a sore thumb to me about the game as well, which we'll discuss in a moment. The only other thing I will just quickly mention before I essentially pass the same question to you, Luke, is I did actually, because at the time, back when we were kids and it came out, I was actually buying the Xbox magazine. I don't actually remember what it's called. I think it was literally called Xbox Australia. And these magazines came with demos. So one of the demo discs I got actually had a level from Halo.
Really?
And I actually played it. I remember playing it because when we sat down to do this playthrough, the moment the level kicked in, I was like, oh my God, why is this so familiar? And again, we'll kind of go into more detail about the level itself later, but it was...
Well, I want to know which level, because I also played a Halo demo years and years and years ago on PC.
Oh, okay.
And I'm wondering if it's the same level.
It may be. So the demo level was the Silent Cartographer.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm assuming that's the one that they pretty much kind of pushed. Which makes sense, because the moment that level started, I was like, oh my God, this is like surprisingly nostalgic, even though I don't remember anything about the game. So that was the only other experience I had with Halo before kind of doing our little playthrough. And I will say I didn't remember anything about it. So
I played this on like whatever crappy laptop with no graphics card I had back in, the mid 2000s. And it barely ran. It was lower settings. I would have turned down the resolution to like 480, and it was horrendous. And I remember it being like all of 15 to 20 frames a second, but that opening beach fight now is like awesome.
It's so
but getting to my expectations, I think I was definitely excited. I wasn't expecting to love the game because simply because I'd never played it at like a friend's place and thought, oh wow, this is such a great game. I really either should have got an Xbox or should make it a mission to get an Xbox or anything like that. I went into it thinking, I'm probably going to like this. There's too many people out there that love this game. It must have been good, but maybe I won't love it, because my love of first-person shooters has just declined over the years. And
that's fair.
I haven't really worked out why. I mean, I like have some theories, but basically I just haven't really played first-person shooters since the Nintendo 64 and GameCube, PS1, Xbox eras. And I just figured that FPS games took sort of a turn or a shift in a direction that I just didn't really enjoy as much. I could never really get into any of the Call of Duties or Battlefields or any of those games. But I thought, I've got to give Halo a go. And I think I can see how Halo influenced a lot of these games that I didn't really care about or bother picking up. But I also think that Halo was not quite as far down the path that they have gone in terms of stylistic changes and like game design changes that are commonplace in first-person shooters now.
Right.
So I shouldn't get to the conclusion, but I'll just very briefly say that I actually quite liked it more than I thought.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, let's just briefly mention what we're going to talk about. How far are we into this
That'll
video?
probably help, yeah.
So you and I played the Master Chief Collection
Yes.
version of Halo Combat Evolved.
Mhm.
We're not really going to talk about the multiplayer.
No,
Because
we didn't really touch that.
We didn't have a lot of time to share across this game.
Yeah.
And
Schedule
lining
was
up
a
our
bit tight.
schedules is always difficult. But yeah, so it's the Master Chief Collection. We both played it on Windows, so it's not like we've got original hardware or anything. You used a mouse and keyboard, I think,
Yes,
David, and I
yes.
used an Xbox, I think, Series. An Xbox Series controller. So we're focusing on the campaign and our experience and enjoyment, or lack thereof, of Halo Combat Evolved's campaign.
Yeah.
And I feel like an easy place to start is the presentation. So
Yes. Very
the
much.
graphics, the art style, all that sort of stuff.
Mhm.
And I've even got a note here: game menus, because you know that I was a bit annoyed, as I often am
that's right,
in these collections. I find it really frustrating when you buy a collection of a game, and the first time I noticed this was the Metroid Prime trilogy. I find it frustrating when they just replace all of the original menus and title screens with some sort of overarching trilogy or collector's edition title screen or menu.
Right.
Because I'm like, I actually want to experience this game as it was originally presented in every little detail.
Mm.
And there are ways that I could do that. But,
Yeah.
time, accessibility, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Got in the way.
I was really hoping
Yeah.
for like a screen where you pick like the game box. And when you click on that box, it loads into like that game and you get the original title. Halo
I
screen
see.
and
I
all that.
see. Yeah.
But none of that.
No.
So, Halo 1, Halo Combat Evolved, did get quite a significant visual overhaul.
Yes.
And from the little bit of reading I've done online, it's not universally well received. And what I
Interesting.
think is great about how you and I played this is you predominantly played with the overhauled, updated, more modern visuals.
Yes.
And I played with the good old OG Xbox visuals.
Yeah. We did a bit of playtesting, I think, in the first level. We kind
Yep.
of swapped back and forth. But yeah, pretty much I went through the whole thing on the newer visuals, and you, I think you also kind of swap back and forth every now and then just to see
Yes.
how it looked.
So I've got some little clips that we'll run through where I just sort of flick between the two visuals. It is great that you can just press a button and
That-
all of a sudden the visuals snap between
Such
original
a great
and upgraded.
quality of life,
Yeah.
feature. So
Yeah,
good.
and obviously it works because the game is 20 years old and we're running it on modern hardware. So,
yeah.
but yeah, it's just great. You don't have to go into a menu and set it to
Yeah, that's right.
traditional
That's
visuals
right.
or anything
Or
like that.
like you don't have to like restart the game or anything.
Yeah,
To do that. I actually did not mind the newer graphics. Like I said, I pretty much played through the whole thing on
Yep.
the newer graphics. I think the reason I didn't mind is because, like I said, I don't really have a point of reference. So, like I said,
Yep.
I never played the original, so I don't really have any nostalgia or fondness of that. Like
Yep.
I said, we did kind of swap back and forth every now and then, and I actually didn't mind the older visuals when we kind of swap back and forth. But I think because I did, this is more just I'm not flexing, but this is more just a personal thing. Because I got a newer computer recently, I decided I wanted to just test as much as I could, and decided just to play the game as high quality fidelity as I could.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. Like, that's definitely worth doing.
But no, I liked it. There were, I will say, and this is a point that I'll actually bring up later, just in regards to some of the levels. I did find a lot of, textures and things were reused a lot. And I don't know how it was on the older visuals, but it was very noticeable on the newer visuals. So that's
Yeah,
the only
interesting.
kind of thing that was.
This is where your gaming experience is going to well exceed mine. I don't think I noticed stuff like that.
Oh,
And,
okay.
I mean, this whole sort of project that we're doing, this YouTube series, podcast thing, hopefully I'll learn a lot from you, David, because I consider myself a gamer, but I don't consider myself like a hardcore gamer, and I don't think you consider yourself one either.
No,
But
well,
I
this was
think-
actually something I was going to mention at the start as well, but forgot. So I'm
Yeah.
glad you brought it up. But yeah, we are not like really, I guess, nose to the grindstone hardcore gamers or anything like that. We enjoy playing games. We
Yeah.
did a lot more gaming back when, we were teens and all that. But nowadays, because, we're older and life kind of gets in the way, we don't play as much as we like. So yeah.
If I'm being honest, I don't play games that often. Am I just like invalidating the whole existence of this project?
Maybe, but I guess it's also kind of useful that, we don't have... Well, it's a unique perspective, right? Because
Yes, yeah, okay.
we're kind of
Let's
just
go with
jumping into...
unique perspective.
Yeah, because we're jumping into this kind of, not blind, but, from a different vantage point.
It is weird though, because like I consider myself like moderately across the gaming industry, and I know what's happening, I know what games are coming, and all that sort of thing. And I always have a current console, and now
yeah, that's
I have a Windows device that I am able to use, which hilariously is actually a Mac. But yeah, like it's funny. I consider myself someone who enjoys games, enjoys playing games, and wants to play more, but I don't actually play that often. But anyway, let's get back to these visuals.
So just as a quick note, me and Luke did play this separately. So we each played it on our own time. And we also recorded our own gameplay.
So the footage that you see in the background while we're talking is just sort of a mixture of your footage and my footage,
Yep.
David. So this first one, the warthog turns the corner. This is in the second level of
wow.
the game. You can see I've just flicked
Yep.
the graphics to modern on that ramp there. And everything, the immediate thing to me, right, is how much brighter everything is.
Yes, I just noticed.
And this is the number one issue that I have, and I think a lot of other gamers and Halo fans have this issue. But
Oh, wow.
for me, it really transforms the atmosphere.
It's the lighting.
And yeah,
yeah.
it is the lighting. And I don't know whether I can
Wow, that's so
confidently
interesting.
say that I think it's a worse atmosphere. But actually, no. You know what? I am going to say that I think that the moodiness of the atmosphere and sort of this vibe of, crawling through the shadows into like the unknown, I think that's gone with the new visuals. And I think this
Yeah,
is a
yeah.
really good example, this particular environment in the second level.
No, absolutely. And whether or not Luke in the future, who's editing the video, is able to pull it up. But if you... because my footage from this level, looks 100% different. It is crazy because this is so dark.
Yeah,
This is so
it's incredibly dark.
Wow. It's scary.
Absolutely. That's what I think. It's got this foreboding feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you swap to the new visuals, everything is so bright
It's
and everything's
so
well
bright.
lit up and you can see all the way to the other side. So there's no like what's coming, what's ahead. I feel like it takes away the mystery. These little pillars that have the lights going up and down.
Yes.
I actually prefer the look of the original where it's just got those singular lights running down the pillars as opposed to the modern reworked visuals where there's just sort of flashy lights moving in all directions.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a personal preference. But you should now see what's this bad guy called?
I think it's an
The
elite.
shield.
Oh, is it? Oh, the one with the shield? I think that's a jackal.
He looks better in the new version, right? You can see the spikes on his head and all that sort of stuff. Whereas in the original, it's just like I don't know,
Just like a blob.
lump of blob of like brains, I guess. And then you've got the elite there. I actually way prefer the original elites. That is one area where I did not like the new redesigns.
Interesting. Okay.
I feel like the colors of the original graphics of the elites in particular really stand out. Like it's the blue one, or it's the red one, or it's the yellow one. And I know those colors still exist in the reworked visuals, but I just don't think they stand out quite as much. It's gone for that more sort of realistic palette as well.
Yeah.
I do prefer the originals.
Interesting. Wow. No, I like I said, because I didn't play through it on the older graphics after the first level. That is such a big difference. Holy cow.
Yeah. Another quick example. This is more of an outdoor environment setting. The first thing that jumps out to me here as well is actually, again, color. So we're outside. I see the advantage of the modern graphics in an outdoor environment where everything looks way more rich and detailed.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It looks much prettier. But there's a few things, again, that I don't like as much. The Halo ring. I don't know if you're seeing the ring now.
Yes.
When you look at it in the modern graphics, it just sort of it blends in more to the background and the sky.
Because it's kind of like obscured by like the weather, yeah, or the skybox.
Yeah. Whereas in the original visuals, it's super distinct.
yeah,
like
very pronounced.
it looks like nothing that I would say that I've ever seen in a game or any sort of sci-fi creative work before.
Oh,
So
that's interesting.
I just think the really saturated, bold colors of like the grass on the hills and the water and everything, I don't know. I think it just stands out a bit more, and maybe there's a bit more personality to it.
It could be, yeah. It's definitely much more contrasting. Yeah.
Yes. And this actually ties into something that I don't like about a lot of modern first-person shooters. And I noticed it when I briefly dabbled in a Call of Duty game or two. And it's so frustrating when you don't know whether, a character or a figure on screen or in the distance is on your team or an enemy, because
right.
everything's just the same color and everything's realistic and the tone is all flat and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I love about this game
Yes.
is the enemies are so colorful and they
It's
stand
very
out against the
vibrant.
background.
Yeah.
And it's easy to see them and it's easy to take them out, and you're not playing with a level of confusion or concern that you might be doing the wrong thing. It just gives you a lot more assuredness.
Yeah, I can definitely see the advantage. I think it comes with the territory of the genre as well, because with a sci-fi setting, you do have a bit more leeway with how you design things.
But if you think as well, think about GoldenEye, right? And how a lot of the enemies in some of those sort of more concretey levels wore green outfits. And then in some of the interior locations, there were a lot of bad guys with blue. Like green and blue are pretty prominent.
Yeah.
So I feel like they stood out a little bit more as well. I remember
That's
the
true.
train level, which had a lot of like its walls and carriages and
Yeah.
carpets and doors and things were like blue and green. And most of the enemies in that level are wearing black. So
Yeah.
again, there's a
So-
distinction there.
Yeah, that's right. And no, I totally get it, because like you said, a lot of the modern, World War first-person shooter games, a lot of the color palettes are very monotone. Grays,
Yes.
browns. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But I'm going to say one more. This is the second last thing I'm going to observe about the visual change. Are you seeing the architecture right now?
Yes.
And do you see how they added all the lines and the lights and everything?
Yes.
I'm actually not a fan of that.
I 100% agree. I think they tried to make it look much more, alien, foreign. I feel like it just felt too much, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I kind of like the barren kind of industrial kind of design of the original.
And I also feel like the original design has more of a primitive vibe in a way.
Yeah.
Like, you think of like temples and ruins and that sort of thing.
Yes, yeah.
And with all those lights and all the extra detail on the architecture, it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
One final thing that I want to bring up. We're in the swamp at the moment.
Yes.
This is currently sort of the reworked modern visuals, and everything looks quite nice and detailed. But then you flick back to those original visuals,
Yeah.
and you'll notice that you can't really see very far ahead of you.
No,
And this is
it's kind of
similar
like
to
a
that
fog.
example from the second level, where the modern visuals just make everything more visible and accessible and less ominous.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know this level.
Yes.
And if I had to play it on the older visuals, I would be so scared.
Yeah.
Oh my god, it is like night and day.
Yeah. The whole vibe feels different. It's even quieter when you swap to the new visuals. There's less like ambient noise in the background.
Oh my god. That is terrifying. Jesus.
And this is the last example that I'll get you to jump to.
Hmm.
So I've walked into the room, and this is the
Yes.
first occasion where you see I guess it's the goop of the flood, and it's falling down through that opening in the ceiling.
Oh wow.
You see those bits of goop bounce off the ground. And if you just, I'll stop talking and you just listen.
Wow. That is
So you can-
crazy.
Do you agree that you can really hear that goop in the
Yeah.
original visuals?
Yeah, it's like raindrops. It's
Yeah.
crazy. I don't think
And
I
I honestly-
ever noticed that.
See, that's what I wanted to know. I wanted to know whether you even really encountered this and thought, oh God, what does this mean? But when I came up to it, I was like, oh, this is bad. This is really bad.
No, I can definitely see why, because this level, like personally, and I'll get to this later as well, but I don't like this level for a number of reasons, and you probably know why. But yeah, that is crazy, because that is not something I noticed at all. To be fair, like I mentioned earlier, I am a bit more of an unga-bunga kind of player. I don't really pay too much attention to things like atmosphere and stuff, because I'm more just focused on the gameplay. But I have to say, that is actually really well done, the older visual style.
Yeah.
I don't even know, because I couldn't see it in that clip, unfortunately, but I don't even know if the newer visuals still has that sound effect. I never
don't
noticed.
have the sound
They
effect.
don't. Okay, because I definitely never noticed it. But that kind of sucks, because even though I hate that, just from a personal preference, because I don't do well with horror situations or atmospheres and things. But yeah, that's a really big. I would say that's a big downgrade.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. And just at the end of that clip, this is just a really tiny example of, again, where I think vibe and atmosphere has shifted dramatically. There's a down ramp with a red light above it.
Oh, yes.
Watch what happens to that red light when I flick back to traditional visuals. It's like flickering. It's kind of like a broken fluoro or something.
Wow.
Whereas you look at the modern visuals and it's just pulsing.
Wow. Yeah, the flickering.
Like, to me, that is a
definitely-
big difference.
Yeah,
that is a
makes
whole
big
difference in vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, classic horror trope, flickering lights. So,
Yeah.
wow. That is crazy. See, this is stuff I never even saw or noticed when I was playing. I could still get like a feeling from the level, you know, what it was trying to do.
Oh, yeah.
But looking at your footage, it's like night and day.
I'm certainly not making the argument that you're going to have a terrible Halo Combat Evolved experience if you play with the modern visuals. But if I was giving advice to someone who was in a similar position to us, who wanted to play this for the first time and see what it was like, and to experience it as it was intended, I would advise the original visuals. But
yeah,
that's also a personal preference. Some people may disagree.
Yeah. The main issue that I had with the visuals is actually apparently a visual bug or a visual glitch with Cortana.
Oh my god. Yeah.
You got it?
Okay, so Cortana is a light bulb.
Yes. So I'm sure Luke will put it up on the screen now. The main visual bug that I had, and apparently this is a known issue, because I did look it up after I finished playing the game. I was like, was it just me or was it anyone else kind of, having this issue? Apparently it is a known bug, and people have made 3 or whoever, the developers been made aware of this. But apparently there's been no fix. So whatever. In any case, just like you said, Cortana looks like a light bulb. There are a few scenes where she gets she moves and she gets really close to the camera, and you can see her bulging eyeballs and like her teeth. So it's like part of her face structure or skeleton is just like not there. So you kind of just see through her face and you can see all the, the eyeballs and teeth and models.
That is weird.
So that really took me out of any cutscenes where Cortana, and this went through the whole game. So I thought maybe, it's just the first level, it'll fix itself. No, every cutscene with Cortana, she looked exactly like this. So it did
ridiculous.
Yeah, it really, I will say, it really took away from the cutscenes. Like I said, though, it didn't bother me too much because I don't want to like piss anyone off, but I didn't really get that much invested.
Yeah.
So it didn't really bother me too much, but it was something that I noticed.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, because that's why I kind of asked you, did you notice anything? And you said no. Well, not really. But I think in the older visuals, Cortana looks completely different. Is that right?
So I'm just watching a clip where Master Chief arrives at Halo's control center. Cortana does a thing where she like jumps out of whatever
she pops up.
chip is inside him and jumps into the computer. So interestingly, like she is all different colors for me. Right now, she is changing between green and blue and red.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But yeah, you can definitely make out her face.
Oh.
And she looks relatively normal for someone who is a computer.
Yeah. Fair enough. I just wanted to, check because that was the main kind of visual thing that stood out during my
Yeah.
playthrough, and it
definitely.
was very, very distracting.
Yeah, I can understand that because she's pretty pivotal to, progressing the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the scene that I've got playing now, she's realizing what they have uncovered. If you couldn't see her facial expressions and she was just like a blob of white light, then
Yeah.
that would be really different. And
Yeah. Not every cutscene was high tension, but yeah, it kind of just stifled the mood a bit whenever
Yeah.
she popped up.
Yeah, that's annoying.
Hmm.
So let's segue to the game's sound. And let me just start by saying overall, I think Halo does a really good job with sound.
Yeah.
I
100%.
like the sound effects of the different weapons,
Mhm.
of the various environments, of the Master Chief's footsteps, depending on what you're walking on. I love the character dialogue, various pieces of enemy dialogue, even though
Yes.
the elites seem to talk in their own language.
Mm.
Those little grunts, that's
the
what
grunts
they call,
are
right? The grunts.
hilarious.
I mean, I at first I was like, why am I understanding them? Why are they speaking English? But then I was like, you know what, whatever. It really doesn't matter. And they just say some genuinely hilarious things. But yeah, overall, I think the sound design is really good. All the,
Yes.
like when you hop into a lift or when you open doors and that sort of thing,
Mhm.
everything is like really, I don't know, it's got like a real weight to it. Everything feels
Yes,
like it.
everything is very weighty, which I like.
Yeah, it feels like you're in some big structure and that this is a giant door and that there's a lot of like strength to these buildings and all that sort of thing. And one of the things, just going back to the weapons, one of the things that I really liked is the impact sound of the weapons.
Absolutely.
Particularly like the plasma stuff. Like when you are running like along a wall or something and the Covenant's shooting at you and you can see those bits of plasma flying through the air towards you and you hear them hit the wall behind you. Like everything just is so immersive.
Yeah. I think out of everything, well, it's kind of a toss-up for me between the soundtrack, because the soundtrack is amazing. But
Yeah.
your point about the weapon sounds are, really spot on, because a lot of them are very impactful. I personally didn't really use a lot of the alien weapons, so I mostly use a lot of the human artillery. And everything had a nice, appropriate, punch to it. So
And actually, the assault rifle, I will say, it does sound a lot better when you swap to the new presentation and the new visuals. So, given that you didn't play much of the old
Yeah.
presentation, you may not be as aware, but that was the only weapon I thought that sounded a little hollow.
right,
And they beefed
okay.
it up big time for the new version.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
Yeah, it just sounds a lot more oomphy and a lot more guts to that weapon in the new version. But, I understand why it originally sounded a little bit more flaky because it's not the strongest weapon.
Yeah, I
you
think
really
they probably
feel
just
like
try
you
to
have
make
to.
it distinct from the others.
Yeah, and you really have to unload a lot of bullets from that gun to do anything. But I would say I used quite a lot of alien weapons. And I like that. So what's the green one that charges up? That is, it's
I've
like
got
a
no idea.
pistol.
Yeah. Plasma pistol, I think it's called.
Plasma pistol. That thing, I like, to me, that doesn't sound like a powerful weapon, but also it's not meant to be because it's not a super powerful weapon.
Yeah.
Whereas then when you swap to like is it like the plasma rifle?
I think it's the rifle. Is the blue one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. That one, all of a sudden you're like, oh, now I'm carrying a bit more oomph. And that's the one that you tend to see the elites carrying a lot
Yes.
more. But the shotgun, that feels like a great weapon.
Oh,
It just like
so good.
it's just so good to use. The sniper rifle looks and feels awesome to me. What I find hilarious, and I'll probably get into this a bit shortly, what I find hilarious is that apparently it doesn't make much sound. And I don't know in the modern visuals, when you load up modern visuals and it's got the modern sound effects, whether it's any different. But like when I was playing, the sniper rifle was a very loud weapon.
Right.
But this is, I guess, something to do with the enemy AI. Quite often, it wouldn't be heard. Like, I would fire that gun, and people might freak out a little bit and be like, oh, someone died near me, but then they would just go back to their patrol. Anyway,
Interesting.
yeah.
Interesting.
But you mentioned soundtrack before, and
Yes.
I really like the soundtrack to
Yeah.
this game.
Yeah.
And this, for me, is a big part of why I ended up liking Halo so much. I feel, and I'm going to go a bit more broader than Halo here, modern FPS games really have toned back soundtracks big time.
Hmm.
You go to like a game like GoldenEye on the N64 or even, Perfect Dark, and even the non-Rare developed games, like there were other Bond games at the time, Turok games, that's gone back a fair way.
Yeah.
They all had a song or some sort of music track per level. And sometimes they'd have a couple, like they'd have like a, your standard track and then the everything's about to blow up, you need to escape track and all that sort of stuff. But every level had a track that would really help to elevate the look and the feel and the vibe of the level.
Yeah. They were much more, I guess, iconic.
Yes.
Yeah.
And somewhere along the way, first-person shooters started to adopt the approach of no soundtrack. And if anyone listening thinks I'm wrong, feel free to correct me. But I have this feeling that it was around the era of Medal of Honor and, possibly early Call of Duty, those games that were based around war and, World War I, World War II, where the objective was to make the play experience as lifelike and realistic to what the real thing would have been as possible. And so, don't have a soundtrack because you're on a battlefield. You want the effects of all the guns firing and the explosions of the grenades to dominate. You want it to feel like you're on a battlefield, and having some epic, guitar-led tune making you feel like a superhero doesn't really fit that vibe.
Yeah, I agree. So to preface this, again, we mentioned it before. Me and Luke, we haven't played that many games. But because I think the last main kind of modern, quote unquote, first-person shooter I got really into that I can kind of somewhat recall was like Modern Warfare 2.
Yep.
I have played other first-person shooters after, but just kind of touching on that point. I actually don't really remember any. And like the game has a soundtrack, right? So it's not like completely silent. But I definitely get what you're saying because I don't remember anything memorable. Like there's no memorable track or song that really stuck out. I'm sure there were like some set pieces or moments during the campaign or the game where they did have, some kind of overarching, song. But
yes.
yeah.
And to be clear, I'm not saying that they didn't exist. I'm saying like absolutely cutscenes, there were songs, bits of soundtrack. Even maybe like as you approached a big building or a key moment in a level, maybe there'd be some background music would come in. But there would just be so many spots where the sound is just predominantly the in-game effects and the stuff that you would hear like in the environment.
It is more, realistic. It is more kind of down to earth.
Yes.
Whereas
and some people might prefer that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think Halo, the soundtrack of this game is like iconic. Like even if you don't really play first-person shooters or if you don't really play Halo, if you're at least somewhat within the gaming sphere, you know of the title thing of Halo, or you know people who know of it because it's so ingrained, it's so memorable.
Yes,
and I think it carries out throughout the entire game because I actually really enjoyed a lot of the soundtrack. We were talking about the Silent Cartographer before. I think the opening of that level is like the perfect kind of example of how the soundtrack really, suits the level, kind of gets you amped up.
I completely agree. Yes.
Because it's so classic, memorable, and impactful. So, but there are definitely other songs throughout the game that are just as good.
So one thing I find interesting as well is just briefly going back to that silent sort of no soundtrack thing is Halo does that at various points where there is no music. I think I actually assumed that Halo was one of the early games to really adopt that approach and was one of the things that I didn't like about it before I ever properly played it. So I was pleasantly surprised playing through this how often there was music in the background. And what I find interesting is it's not always like overly dramatic music. Touching on the silent cartographer, which you just mentioned, that opening beach scene,
Yeah.
like it's that classic Halo theme.
Yes.
It's not necessarily like that first, gentle choir-esque title theme, but it's sort of the main Halo theme that drives throughout a lot of the songs, and it really makes you feel like you're in the middle of an action scene,
Yes.
and
Absolutely.
it makes you feel like a tank, like a boss, like a, to go really sort of just definition based, like a superhero, I guess. And that's really cool. But what I also really loved is that there were other moments in the game where there were just bits of soundtrack thrown in just to, add to the vibe, add to the mood, add to that sort of alien atmosphere. And often, to me, it felt like sort of almost 90s action movie stuff. Maybe even like borderline 80s at various points.
Yeah. I noticed there were actually surprisingly a lot more like rock compositions, mainly for
Yes.
like a lot of the engagements, like when you wind up in like a skirmish or a battle.
Yes.
Which just, gets you in the mood to,
Yeah.
shoot.
But interestingly, so there's definitely the rock-esque ones, but there's also sort of some of the more electronic-y ones that I'm thinking of that
Okay.
I just did not expect would be in this sort of a game. Like they remind me more of like, playing GoldenEye or Perfect Dark. Back when there were composers who would just come up with really cool themes for levels that would just play throughout the entire level. Let me see if I can get a clip.
Yeah, it's kind of like the drums kicking in.
Yes. And then wait, you'll hear some synths and like some backing vocals.
Look, I'm on fire.
Roger that. Marines!
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Like to me, this is like borderline 80s vibe.
It does kind of sound like that, yeah. It does kind of give you that very alien feel.
Yeah. But what I really like about it is it's not trying to be serious. It's not trying to make out that this is really intense, really serious, really important. Like it's just really casual, chill backing music.
It is actually surprisingly chill, yeah.
Yeah. And those kinds of tracks appear a lot more than I expected throughout the game in parts that I just at first was like, this doesn't feel right. But then I got into the track and I was like, you know what, this is cool. Like it's making me feel awesome. Like I feel like I'm going to take down some bad guys. Like it's just, and I think ultimately, if I was to sort of describe what the soundtrack does or how it changes the game experience for me, is it really allows Halo to just become a game that actually doesn't take itself too seriously. It's not full of characters who are, trying to be more deep and meaningful than they need to be. It's not.
Yeah.
It's got this more laid back sort of, this is an action game vibe, and we know we're an action game, and so we're just going to have fun with it rather than try to be really cool and relevant.
Yeah.
Which is, for me, I think is more of a Call of Duty-esque, Battlefield-esque sort of feel, where everything is serious, and if someone dies, it's like a big deal, and it's like everything's a challenge and everything's difficult, and
it's like very
life's so
dramatic.
hard.
Yeah.
Overly dramatic. And there's certainly a lot of, especially in the early levels, as you'll know, there is a lot of moments where you're accompanied by people on your team and they do a lot of talking and banter and stuff.
Yes, yeah.
And that sort of thing exists in other first-person shooters, and I've always found it annoying because, again, I always feel like it's very dramatic and serious. But Halo it nails this balance between being serious enough that it's, making you feel like you're in an action scene, but also sort of humorous at various points enough for you to not take it all too seriously.
100% agree.
There is one clip that I have to show you, and it's only like 5-10 seconds, and I will find it very quickly. and I just think it's hilarious. This is just like my favorite line from the whole game. And I don't know if you heard this when you played it, because I guess in theory, depending on how and where you kill enemies, it may or may not trigger. But what your comrade says when he kills this bad guy. Just watch.
Let's listen.
Do you need some more ammo?
Oh, that is amazing.
Yeah. Like
Do
he
you need
literally
some more
just
ammo?
stands there filling him up with plasma. Do you need more ammo?
Oh, that is so good.
Like that is just, in my opinion, the perfect example of Halo just getting that balance right between
Yeah.
having overly macho comrades who sound like they're taking everything too seriously, but actually it's all just a bit of fun.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, you're 100% agree. It definitely feels a lot more like the arena shooters of old, very kind of more arcadey.
Yes.
So
yes.
it's got that really nice balance with how they've incorporated the music into that. Well,
Yes.
sorry, not music, but the sound design.
Yes. Given that we're talking about how the soundtrack makes us feel while playing, I just want to start to actually talk about what it feels like to play Halo Combat Evolved in 2021.
Right.
And there's a bit to talk about,
Yeah.
but this is ultimately what makes Halo so good, in my opinion, is it is very fun to play.
Absolutely.
Sometimes there are issues with repetitiveness and length of levels and that sort of thing, but in a lot of cases, I think it's overcome by just how fun Halo is to play. It's sort of a difficult thing to tackle because there's so much to talk about, but the first thing I think I'll mention is controlling Master Chief. I think Master Chief potentially would feel slow for a lot of gamers today, especially given that there's no sprint option where you can like click the stick and do a sprint. But for me, it actually made the game maybe a bit more accessible, and because it was a bit slower, allowed me to sort of consciously think about what I was doing, where I needed to be, what I needed to avoid, and that sort of thing. And maybe that's just because games have advanced and the ability of gamers has advanced, and so things have gotten faster and people have gotten quicker at reacting to certain situations. But I liked the pace and the sort of almost the heaviness of Master Chief.
Yeah.
What did you think?
No, I agree. I think that's part of the, I guess, design.
Yes.
So, and they pulled it off really well. So, yeah, it does feel a lot more weighty, controlling Master Chief compared to, I guess, modern shooters, because like you said, nowadays you can sprint, you can grapple, you can wall climb, you can do all these fancy maneuvers. Most first-person shooters are like part shooter, part parkour. So
yes.
kind of coming back to this, at least for me, because like I said, I have played quite a few more modern shooters than I guess you have. Coming back to this, yeah, it did take me a bit of time to kind of get a feel for it. All of the core, mechanics are there, and like you said, if we just look at like the gameplay on its own, it is rock solid, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think it's great. It's classic Halo, and we touched on it earlier with the sound design, but the weapons feel good, they're weighty, they're punchy, and controlling Master Chief is really good too. I like your point about how even though things have kind of progressed away from this design, because there's no sprint with Master Chief, just kind of walking around does kind of, I don't know, like you said, it kind of makes you feel more in control, which is a bit weird, mainly because there's only just like one set speed, essentially. So, no, I actually just fundamentally really, really enjoyed just playing the game. Like everything else aside, yeah, it was great.
Yeah. I think it's definitely worth now just going into the enemy AI and how that adds to the experience.
Oh, yeah.
So you're, again, going to have a bit more relevant, up-to-date knowledge as to where the enemy AI sits in terms of its sort of believability, the actual intelligence level of it, relative to games that are coming out now. But if you think about when Halo came out in 2001,
Yeah.
before it was on the Nintendo side, GoldenEye and Perfect Dark. On the PlayStation side, some of those Medal of Honor games. I feel like I'm probably missing a huge PlayStation FPS that if anyone were to listen.
The only one I could think of is Killzone, but
Yeah, but Killzone wasn't on the PS1.
oh no, it wasn't. That came out way
Yeah.
later.
And look, I probably need to acknowledge that the PS2 was out before the Xbox, I think by about a year. And so you could argue that the first Time Splitters and possibly maybe Turok Evolution, I think it was the fourth one in that series, they were all FPSs that were available on other consoles. But I was just really impressed with the enemy AI for like a few key reasons. One of the obvious ones is you throw a grenade and at the very least, the smarter, more advanced enemies, the elites, they will often leap out of the way of the grenades, which I had never really seen. I've seen it in more modern games, but I hadn't seen it in any games prior to Halo. The other thing that I really found fascinating was the fact that so many of the enemies, again, the more intelligent ones, so the elites and beyond, don't just charge at you. They wait.
Yeah.
They find cover in exactly the same way that you do when you're playing, and they wait for you. It's sort of old school FPS was if you were really struggling to, run and gun and complete levels because the challenge was too high, you'd sort of camp. You'd find a good spot where you could just pick off the enemies as they came around the corner or whatever. But you can't do that in this. There are so many situations where you need to go and force the elite out of their cover or throw the grenade to make them jump or whatever. And it's just really intelligent. To me, the way it made me feel was that the enemy was playing in the same style that I was playing in. So the game was designed in such a way that it encouraged me to play a certain way, which was often to use the cover and my surroundings to my advantage to protect myself. And that the enemy did the same thing. And that, again, makes it feel more immersive. It makes it feel, in a way, more realistic. Obviously, it's sci-fi, so it's not real. But it makes you feel like you're part of the game a lot more.
Absolutely. I think what I found, there's a bit of a tangent, but with all of that, because I was coming from more modern shooters and then coming back to this, I was more into the whole run and gun kind of play style. And I found that, and you probably would have found out on your own as you were playing through it, that doesn't really work very well in Halo.
No.
I definitely find a more kind of defensive playstyle is more appropriate. It would help you, progress and beat the level because, like you said, all of the enemies are reactive. They take into account player space. They take into account, like you said, throwing grenades. Some of them will dodge out of the way. Others, will just eat it in the face. But I think, and I'm not sure if it was even like a specific marketing point from the game itself, or if it was more just word of mouth. But I think back in the day, I think that was one of the main selling points, where the AI was considered as, well, like I said, because I think there was this positive stigma about Halo being revolutionary for the genre, because it introduced all these new features and settings and blah, blah, blah. And I think one of the main ones was the AI. I think it was actually really well done. I mean, of course, it's still a bit janky here and there. There are some enemies you can still kind of cheese if you know what you're doing. Mainly the hunters, if you know what to do with them. But going back to your first question, just in kind of relation to more modern games, I do think it has definitely gotten better because obviously that's just how it works, right? Over time, things get better. But I will say, and a quick preface again, we're not, we're not experts. Game design is hard, so I'm not taking anything away from that. But there are definitely some more modern games that are probably on par or even worse.
Not as good.
than what I saw playing through the first Halo game. So it's quite impressive. I was actually I really enjoyed the fact that it was challenging. Or that I had to adjust my play style to kind of get through it.
Yes. I think the one thing that sort of occasionally frustrated me was how defensive you have to play in certain scenes.
Yeah, I died
But
a
again,
lot.
yeah. But I also don't necessarily think that upon reflection it would have been this will sound amusing, but it wouldn't have been as bad if I didn't have a time constraint to play this game. Like if I was playing this back when we were teens and I just had all the time in the world to play whatever I wanted whenever I wanted, I don't think I would have been frustrated by that. So just to add a bit more detail, there were times where I sort of wanted to run into a room and just take stuff out, and I almost found myself reverting to a position like behind the door into said room. And there was often this sort of weird standoff where, as we just discussed, the elites on the other side aren't just coming in, letting you kill them as they approach.
Yeah.
But you can't progress the level unless you go into the room to take them out. And I was sort of thinking about it like in the days that followed playing some of these levels. And it does a really good job of sort of recreating some of those action movie scenes. Like I often think of Star Wars where there's a standoff between the protagonist and some of the stormtroopers, and there is a door, like you're fighting through a door, or like you're popping out and shooting, making shots through the doorway into a room, or like you think of like an old Western or something, where you're ducking behind a bar or something, and they're shooting you and the glass is shattering everywhere and stuff. But no one's sort of just running in and taking each other out. It's like this sort of skirmishy standoff situation.
Yes.
And I realized that, there's moments like that in Halo where you are like popping out through the door, throwing a grenade, ducking back for cover. And on the surface, it can seem like you're just camping. But actually what you're doing is incrementally, taking out the opposition.
Yeah.
And you're not
forward.
just, you're doing that. And it's not just mindless and thoughtless. You've got to be considered in your approach. And I really liked that a lot.
Yeah, no, me too. Like I said, it was definitely a hard lesson for me because, like I said, I'm so used to the more modern shooters where maneuverability is much more developed. And I actually, personally, prefer the more developed maneuverability of the modern shooters because I feel like it gives you more control and it makes you feel, I guess, better. It makes you feel, I'm really cool. I can do all this stuff.
Yeah.
But like I said, I still really enjoyed this, but it was definitely kind of a bit of a learning curve because I'm not sure how much you saw of my footage, but I died a lot in the first couple of levels. And still even to some of the in some of the later levels, I ended up dying a lot too because I was, my mindset kept kind of reverting back to the just run and gun. Whereas, like you said, it was a more incremental kind of progress where you just kind of slowly push forward. You take your time and you play more defensively. Because I found myself in a lot of situations where even though the enemy encounters were kind of clearly like indicated, like I knew it was coming up. If I wasn't careful, I could still be like overwhelmed, right?
Yes.
So I wasn't a superhuman, even though we're a Spartans and all that. You can still be overwhelmed and die quite easily.
And to be clear, like I'm talking a lot of praise here, but you mentioned being overwhelmed. So the library.
Oh God.
That level. So look, in the end, it was doable.
Yeah.
But that was like a learning curve in and of itself. There are moments early on in that level where wave after wave of the enemy, and in this case it's the Flood now, we've sort of moved on a bit from just the Covenant, and this level centers exclusively around the Flood as the enemy.
Yes.
Wow. Like,
yeah.
The ones, so with the Flood, you've got the little tiny things, the little minions that just sort of charge you and take off bits of your health, and they're more annoying, but if enough of them get in the way and trap you when there's a bigger one around, they can really mess you up.
You're screwed.
Yeah. And then there's like the clusters of those mini Floods where you shoot them and they explode. And the little ones come out, right?
Yeah.
Those things, especially early on in the library, where you're not really sort of aware of how to approach the level yet, they would just explode in a huge chain reaction.
Yes.
Where I would keep dying. Like, I would shoot one of them and it would explode and it would cause another one to explode. And sometimes there would be like a plasma grenade that some other enemy had dropped that would explode, and then I would just keep dying from these like chain reaction of explosions, and it was very frustrating at first. And that is by far the most defensive level, in my opinion, that I have played in Halo, and I constantly was moving backwards in that level while taking out the enemy, constantly moving away, just trying to keep everything in front, making sure that everything was down a single sort of pathway so that nothing could deviate off to the sides. There was just so much backward movement.
Yeah, I think that is the level that really hammered it into my brain where I could not rush, because there were sections in it where, like you said, it was just swarms and swarms of the Flood. And I wasn't sure if I needed to just clear a path and go, or if I should wipe them out so I'm safe and then just, take my time. And there were some instances where it felt like the former, where I could just, make a path and just go for it. But then that is not how you progress in that level, because I had the exact same experience. I just kept getting completely swarmed, and then there would be chain reactions up the butt, and I would just find myself backed into a corner and then die. So yeah, it was very, very. I definitely found myself getting very frustrated at that point. So that was my big. That was when I started to get. I'm starting to not enjoy this as much.
Yes.
But like I said, part of that's on me, because I was still in unga bunga mode, just going for it. But I don't know if you got as frustrated as I did, but yeah.
I definitely did. And that's not the only element of frustration I felt with that level. And this is probably my main gripe with the game. It's very repetitive.
Oh, yeah.
I think that level and one other level are big offenders of this.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Assault on the control room.
Yes.
Assault on the control room. You would... I feel like, you're meant to get to the building where, the control room exists. And once you're in the building, you've got to I feel like you've got to go all the way to the top and then cross some bridge, or like all the way to the bottom or something like that.
Yeah.
But there was a series of rooms and environments that to me felt like they were just repeated, like literally copy paste.
Absolutely.
And the only differences were maybe an extra couple of enemies in each stage as you get more difficult. And maybe the type of enemy got a bit more difficult. But like you'd cross that bridge. I'm trying to paint the picture here, but you'd cross that bridge outside in the snow.
Yes.
And some of these scenes I really liked. Like the first time I went across that bridge, I remember the ground had bits of glass in it that would break, and then there'd be a level below the bridge that you could drop down to. And there's another bridge parallel, like beside you, that you can't get to, but you can see it and shoot across to it.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
I remember these moments where like I'd be shooting enemies down through the floor and then shooting enemies over the side and then taking out enemies that were attacking me on my level. And I was like, this really feels like a 360 experience. Like I'm being attacked from all levels and I have to be reacting to all directions and not just shooting what's in front of me. And I really liked that. But
that part was great.
You go across that bridge, you enter into a room.
And you go inside.
You take out all the enemies in this room, and then you like go through this zigzag corridor.
Yes.
And then you like go down a lift or something.
Yes.
And then you're in another room, and you take out those enemies. And then there's another one of those zigzag corridors with the door at each end. The loading corridor. It's loading the next part of the game. It's a loading screen in disguise.
Yeah.
And I reckon you do that pattern like 4 or 5 times. And then you feel like you've made some progress. But then all of a sudden there's like another set, like another building like that where you do it all again.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but don't you then do it in reverse or something?
Absolutely. Exactly. We go through the exact same level backwards.
Yeah.
Later on in the game. So I 100%, and I'm so glad you brought this up because that was such a big sticking point for me. Because the first time through it, I was like, oh my God, this level is so huge. And I was like, Jesus Christ, this is going to take me forever. But I slowly made my way through it. And for what it was, I thought, okay, it's all right. Not too bad. We got to try a few different vehicles and things like that. So, and we got introduced to, big open space battles and stuff. So,
yes. And those two things that you just mentioned are really cool. The vehicles break it up and are really cool to play.
Yeah.
And some of those open spaces feel like real battlefields.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
But then, just like you said, you get to the parts where you have to go inside. And then it's just the exact same rooms,
Yeah.
one after the other with the same exact corridors. And
Yeah.
again, probably just an element of the time when the game was being made, right? So they had to
Yeah.
reuse assets or whatever. But at some point, it got to the point where I kind of lost my orientation.
Yes.
The only thing that I found, and this also applies to the library as well, the only thing that I found that would point me in the right direction are literally the arrow markers on the floor. So I'm not sure if you
Yeah.
noticed, but there are the big blue arrow marks on the floor that literally point you where you need to go. I'm not sure if they show up on the old visuals, but on the new visuals,
I'm
they're
not sure.
very, very obvious.
I feel like there are arrows, but the thing that I ended up using was I often found that the sort of doorway that was the exit doorway, as opposed to the doorway that you came in, tended to be lit up differently.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
I found there was often a yellow sort of light hue around the path that was like the exit, because, you know,
Oh,
a
okay.
lot of those rooms, the zigzag corridor in and the zigzag corridor out would be identical. So it would be easy to just pick the wrong one and go, oh, damn it, I've just walked backwards, not forwards.
Yeah.
But yeah, I tended to find that it was sort of like a different light, different bit of lighting would sort of
Interesting.
indicate where to
Okay,
go forward.
okay.
And I generally use that, and it seemed to work.
Seemed to work. Okay. Well, you made your way through it, so that's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I was, not a fan of that.
Yes.
Like I said, I feel like a lot of it is just more the age of the game. You know, when it was made,
Yeah.
and designed.
Well,
at the
I
time.
also think it was probably development time as well.
yeah.
And I think I'm a little bit forgiving of that repetitiveness because so much of the rest of the game is polished. And, you know, we're in a time right now where games come out with day one patches to make them playable.
Very true.
Games come out like 6 months before they're even finished, or even a year before they've, well, like years before they're finished in the case of Cyberpunk. And I'm assuming that potentially at some point, either to make sure that the game felt long enough, or to make sure there was enough levels, or to ensure that they had time to focus on other aspects of game design that they deemed more important to the final product, that maybe they were like, look, let's just, you know, copy paste this section 2 or 3 times and we'll make the bad guys a little bit more difficult.
Possibly.
Because
yeah.
it's not just, and this is the, I'm going to wrap up my criticism here, but it does get a little bit worse in my opinion. Not the repetitiveness within single levels, but the fact that when you get to the end of the game, there's actually not as many unique environments as I think you might expect. So I'm just going to look at the levels here. So level 3, Truth and Reconciliation.
Yeah.
You're out and about in a new environment that's got a lot of cliff faces and
Yeah,
you know, a lot
yeah.
of rocky formations.
Yep.
And then you get on the Covenant ship, which is fine. I liked it. It looked like a nice alien ship. But the second last level of the game, Keys, where you board a Covenant ship in an attempt
yes.
to bring back your captain, like that's to me that's basically the same environment. Like
Yeah.
the level structure is a little bit different, but the environment is identical.
Yeah.
You've got Assault on the Control Room, which is set, you know, in that snowy environment with those big towers that you've got to take forever to meander your way through. And then you've got 2 Betrayals.
2 Betrayals,
which
is going back through it in
is set in the
reverse.
same place. Yeah. So that's 4 levels all of a sudden that only have 2 unique environments. The library is very samey the whole way through, as we've touched on.
Yes.
But the final example I'll go with here is that the first level and the last level are kind of on the same ship.
Yeah, we're on the
like,
on the
I
Pillar
don't
of
want to.
Autumn.
Yeah, I sort of don't want to spell out the last level because, you know, it is a bit of a spoiler, and I've tried to avoid spelling out bits of the story and explaining exactly what happens in case, you know, the 3 people who might listen to our first episode want to play it without having too much of the experience ruined. But yeah, like the last level, not all of it, but a significant portion of it is kind of the same as the first. So all of a sudden, you've got 6 levels sharing 3 locations, which means there's only 4 other levels with unique locations. And I would go so far as to say that they're they don't feel completely unique the whole time as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I guess from like a plot perspective, there's logical reason why we would, come back to these places.
I 100% agree.
Yeah. But I definitely agree because, I mean, there could have been some, I guess, option to make like a new environment for a particular thing. So
yeah, my theory is that again it just comes back to development.
I think so. So it could have just been maybe a measure. Yeah, I think it may have just been a measure to maybe not pad out the game, but to maybe push the completion time a bit.
I think it is kind of to pad it out. I mean, I've got a few theories. Like 10 levels isn't a huge amount of levels. Like a lot of other games have roughly that much. Like, Time Splitters 2, for instance, that's a 10-level campaign.
Yeah, that's true.
Although every level is so unique.
Every level is very different.
But I just think that there would have been so much. We were just talking about how good the AI is, how good the game feels to play. Like, we touched on the fact that there's lots of different vehicles that, are fun to pilot. There's clearly a huge amount of development time went into making this game a fun experience. And I guess, you can't just develop a game forever. And so one of the things to streamline their development and to allow them to spend so much time on the feel and the playability of the game was, well, we'll just design the story around less or fewer locations. We'll reuse some. I think in an ideal world, you would have slightly more variation, but I also understand why maybe there is a little bit more repetitiveness than ideal. It's definitely something to be aware of, and you certainly can't excuse it completely. You can, I mean, from my point of view, I can adopt an understanding, but I'm still holding it against the game.
No, fair enough. Yeah, like I'm in the same boat. When I found out I had to go back through the assault on the control room in 2 Betrayals, I was like, I was not really enthused about that.
Yeah.
So even though technically we did actually go to new areas or rooms, because when you go through that level the first time, you actually don't explore the whole map because you don't have access to the whole map.
Yes, that's true.
So technically, we actually do go to new rooms, although they're pretty much the same corridors.
Absolutely.
But definitely was not excited about doing that again.
Yeah.
So I think that's fair.
The only thing gameplay-wise that I thought was a little lacking, or just like not super refined, didn't make a whole lot of sense in my mind, was the stealth element, which, like, I fully acknowledge that there isn't a lot of stealth in the game.
No.
But there are a couple of moments where it's like actively promoted, or at least, sorry, maybe just one moment where it's actively promoted. And I feel like there's a couple of other scenarios throughout where it sort of feels like it's encouraged, particularly when the grunts are asleep.
Right.
Did you came across asleep grunts,
yes,
right?
Where
you just
the ones on the bridge.
melee them and bam, they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I saw, weirdly, sometimes I felt really bad just killing them. Is that just me? Or?
I think that was just you. I didn't have any. I didn't have any remorse. So
I was just like, oh man, this dude's just having a peaceful nap, and I'm just like, bam, you're dead.
Yeah.
I guess it's an easy way to go. So
yeah, that's true.
But yeah, that third level, the truth and reconciliation, that starting scenario is absolutely like all stealth. You are actively encouraged by Cortana, I'm fairly sure.
Yes.
In fact, let's just watch this little clip here. So, literally, like, Master Chief is going to, take everyone out stealthily, and everyone else don't open fire. Right? So here I am, just creeping through. Go look at this! They see me. Like, I'm miles away from that dude, and they've both seen me. Like, it's almost like there's just a zone that you walk into that automatically triggers enemy awareness of your presence.
Yeah, I when I was playing through the level as well, I noticed the same thing because I was like, this is weird. They want me to be stealthy now.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like the game has any built-in stealth mechanics. I think the only thing that really comes close would be if you were to like melee an enemy from the back, you can kind of like take him out in one shot.
Yes. I completely agree, and I'm glad you brought that up because I completely forgot that you can do the one-hit kill if you approach an enemy from behind.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
like you said, I feel like that there's maybe like a zone or like a certain radius where if you enter it, the enemies will notice you, or detect you on some level. Because a lot of modern stealth games, they have the whole, and I guess from your experience, I guess what you're more familiar with be like Metal Gear Solid, right?
Yes,
where they have the
definitely.
little cone of vision and things that play into effect, like the amount of noise you make, how fast you move, stuff like that. I honestly didn't think, and I'm not sure if it actually does. I didn't think Halo has any of those kinds of mechanics built into it. So when I played through this level, stealth was not really an option for me. So
and you don't need to play stealthily either. You
that's
can
right.
easily just run in and take them out.
That's it. That's it.
Like this is where actually playing with the refreshed graphics here.
Oh yeah.
You might have just seen me take out
Take out the elite.
So I figured that if I stayed behind those two rocks to the right of the screen there, that would at no point trigger the enemy's awareness that I was there, even though a couple of the grunts would freak out when they would see like an elite die or something. But
interesting.
no triggering of enemy presence. See, you can see them there. They're like running around
They're
like
running
crazy.
around.
But I stay back behind this tree, behind those two rocks, and at no point do they see me. So you can play this section successfully in a stealthy way if you stay behind this like invisible line.
Wow, interesting.
But the other thing that I find really dumb actually is that sniper rifle is so loud.
It is so
Like,
loud.
How do they not know where I am?
Yeah, because all of the there's no not because a lot of games have things like silencers or suppressors, right?
Yes,
and those
yes.
aren't actually like in real life. They're not literally silent. They still make noise.
Yeah.
But I guess just gameplay wise, you would think something like that would factor in.
Yeah.
But every weapon in this game is loud as heck. So
Yes, absolutely. And just on that topic of the like volume of a weapon, like how loud they are, you go back to a game like GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64, and every single gun had like a noise rating. And every time you fired that gun, the game would calculate a radius around you. Depending on the weapon you use, so if you use like a machine gun or the AK-47, there would be a really large radius that would actually extend to like a whole bunch of other rooms. And if you just fired that and there were enemies within that radius, they would come and attack you. Whereas if you fired the silenced, pistol, the radius would be tiny. It would be like literally just around you, so no one could hear it. It's just interesting that is clearly not in play here.
yeah,
And a game that, came out on much older hardware had it. So, stealth, not Halo's strength, but, it's not a stealth game. So.
yeah, definitely not a stealth game. And I think you mentioned it earlier. I don't think, I can't recall any other time in the game where it was brought up or there was much of an opportunity to do it. There may have been some spots, but I just went in guns blazing. So,
Absolutely, yeah. So, we've talked quite a bit about how Halo feels to play, but one element that I think contributes a lot is Master Chief himself. And I guess the story and characters that are built around him.
like supporting characters,
Yeah. I have to say, one of the things that I was not expecting going into playing Halo at all, but I was super, super impressed with, was just how well I think they nailed the Master Chief character. Like, he is super chilled out. Like, well, not super chill, but like, he never gets flustered.
No.
But he also takes things relatively seriously. Like, I'm thinking of the moment where there's sort of a bit of an argument between Cortana, the Monitor, and like, Master Chief's there saying, hold on, he's a friend, he's helped us out, let's not jump on the hate bandwagon too quickly.
Yeah.
But then, when Cortana reveals what's going on, he's like, is this true? And all that sort of stuff. He's getting a bit serious. He's a bit annoyed. But there's so many moments during the game where he just has just really small little one-liners, and he's just real chill and like, yeah, you know, I can handle this or whatever. And I like the fact that he doesn't have too much dialogue. It's similar, in my opinion, to the way Link doesn't talk in Zelda ever.
Yeah, it's
because you're playing as Link.
That's exactly it. It's the typical silent protagonist trope, you know, where they make the main character as kind of as passive as possible, so the actual player can kind of, I guess, somewhat take the mantle or insert themselves into the game. It is, I guess, a little bit more immersive, so you kind of have more control. But I do agree. I do like that they did take some moments to kind of flesh or to give the Master Chief some personality. Even though we're controlling him and it's not as, I guess, quote unquote immersive. If we were to, you know, just pretend we were Master Chief. I like that because to kind of branch off on what you were just mentioning there with that cutscene, there are actually a lot of moments throughout the story where, the Master Chief and Cortana had like these, you know, little moments of dialogue, and also Master Chief with other characters like, you know, Keys and the Marines and stuff, which kind of adds to his character a bit more, which I really like.
I don't know if you've watched it. This is a TV show I'm about to talk about. That Star Wars series, The Mandalorian.
I have not seen it, no.
I'm not recommending it. It's grossly overrated, in my opinion.
Oh, goodness.
Look, it has good moments. But it is not like the greatest show of all time, which some people suggest it is. I feel like his Master Chief is kind of similar to the Mandalorian in that show. I think they like nailed Master Chief even better. I feel like he's they never overdo the cliches. They just tone it back just the right amount for him to just be who you want him to be. But yeah, and you also mentioned the other characters, like the bits of, you know, interplay between him and Cortana are really nice. It helps build both their personalities. Yeah, exactly. And it helps give the story, which I'm not a huge fan of the story, but it helps to make the story a little bit more, not believable, but just maybe a bit more relevant.
That's a good point that you just brought up, because I definitely feel like the story itself, I mean, like it's not, I think I mentioned earlier that the story, like I wasn't super like invested into the story. I mainly,
right. Yeah, I remember you saying,
yeah. I mainly play games to play, to, you know, play the game. So I'm more focused on the gameplay aspects. But the story itself wasn't bad. It's just like, it wasn't anything like super, I guess, revolutionary. I wasn't expecting anything revolutionary. So like, I'm not disappointed or anything like that. I definitely feel like the point you just made earlier, the dynamic between the Master Chief and the other characters definitely made the story better. I feel like it added a bit more weight and tension, especially like you said in that cutscene, when they were kind of figuring out the big, you know, twist or what they were actually doing on Halo. Because otherwise it's just kind of, oh, okay, cool. You know, big weapon, crazy aliens. Yeah. So I found it serviceable, I guess, is what I can really say.
I would agree. So I think, and like I've deliberately tried to not cover story too much in case, you know, the two people listening actually haven't played the game like we hadn't and want to play it without spoilers. So I don't want to go into it in depth, but I will say, you know, I feel like there's broadly speaking two twists where, you know, I guess the third enemy of the game is sort of revealed. You're like, oh, okay, this is different. Then there's that twist of like, do we trust the monitor? Is the monitor trustworthy? And the sort of the explanation for, you know what, I'm going to go into a bit of detail. I'll put some sort of
just
skippable timestamp in the description.
Yeah.
So this is the official spoiler warning. The whole Halo defense weapon, whatever sort of thing, where all living or all life essentially that can feed the flood needs to be wiped out in order to eliminate the flood. I was just like, what? Like, that just seems a bit overkill. Like, okay, you've got to prevent the flood from destroying essentially the universe or whatever by, you know, consuming it. And to do that, you cut off its food supply, and that's what Halo is. Am I right, or did I misinterpret?
No, that's what I got about it. So Halo is literally a weapon that was designed long time ago to essentially stop the flood or kill the flood.
Yeah.
And like you said,
it does it by killing its food source.
Correct. That's right.
Like what?
Yeah. So essentially, you wipe out all of sentient existence because the flood can only prey on sentient life forms, which means once Halo activates, the only sentient life form would be the flood, and then they will eventually die because there's no food. Yeah, that's essentially what I got out of it. Got out of it.
Halo's objective is to kill all life.
Well, I guess in this sense, maybe, I mean, I'm sure there's like a radius, and I think they mentioned there were other rings as well.
Okay.
So maybe it only goes so far.
It's just, to me, it's just a weird one. Like,
it's a bit overkill, I feel, but like I said, maybe we haven't been exposed to as much of the lore. So maybe,
but you've got to remember that when this game came out, this was the law.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Like, I don't deny that they have potentially made certain decisions in future games to perhaps rein in that kind of ridiculousness a bit, but
like maybe there's like an explanation, or maybe there were no other options or something like that. Yeah.
Or just like maybe added context. Like you said, maybe there's a radius of destruction. But even then, I feel like that's just sort of creating like extra clauses to make it plausible rather than just having a genuinely plausible plot. Yeah. So actually, that was slightly disappointing.
But it made for a pretty intense twist. So,
but that's the thing. For me, that twist wasn't intense.
Okay.
I was just
fair enough.
Like the first twist. You sort of see it coming. With the whole, there's clearly a third enemy here, and they're like more powerful than the Covenant. Like that was all believable, and I found it really fascinating watching these fights between the Flood and the Covenant as you approach new rooms, and you can sort of just dip in and out of them as you need to. And let like both the Covenant and the Flood take enough of each other out to make it easy for you. Yeah. I don't know. I not sold on the story, but. Even with a few of these negatives that we've brought up, like repetitiveness, the fact that stealth, I mean, that's not really a negative. Stealth's just under.
I just don't think it exists. So
yeah. So slight repetitiveness, issues with the story. It's sort of testament to how fun the game is that they really don't hold back my appreciation of the game.
Absolutely. And I really like the characters. So
yes. And that's going to lead right to the final thing.
Okay.
Which you're probably not going to like, David, but I always like to ask these questions.
Oh, God.
I mean, I'm not going to make you give the game a score because I know how anti-review scores you are.
Yeah, not a fan.
I mean, I have some ideas. I have some review score ideas.
Right.
But the main thing that has been bugging my mind is Halo Combat Evolved a masterpiece or not?
Are we looking at that from right now, or are we kind of taking into account when it came out?
Well, this goes to the complicated thought processes that I have been going through. Is a masterpiece always a masterpiece, or does a masterpiece lose that status?
Oh, God, we're getting pretty deep here, Luke. Getting philosophical.
Like, look, for example, I think Zelda Ocarina of Time is a masterpiece, and I still think that.
And I would disagree, but that's interesting.
Have you played the game?
I have, yes.
What?
Yeah.
What? From start to finish?
No, not start to finish.
Whoa. David.
Okay.
Well, I'm adding this to the videos that we need to make.
Okay, no, add it to the list. But getting back on track with Halo. Yeah, so I think we should kind of go back to the whole, I guess, perspective of when we started this whole project or playthrough that we did, because I think that was the whole point, right? We decided to play this game that we never played before to see, how it was, what we thought of it, blah, blah, blah. So I think that's kind of the perspective we should look at it at. Yeah.
So wait, you mean you don't want to answer the question as to
No,
whether
no,
or
no.
not it's a masterpiece?
I will. But do you have like a score? Did you want me to go first or?
Yeah, you go first.
Okay. So as Luke said, I'm not a big fan of review scores. I find them arbitrary. So I'm not going to give a score, but I will say, based on what I experienced, my experience playing the game essentially, and going through essentially what we just talked about our experience, the game itself, and how much we enjoyed it. I would recommend the game. Like if someone asked me, should I play Halo Combat Evolved, I would definitely recommend it to them. I think the game is a really, really solid first-person shooter. And there's a note that I did want to make with kind of in comparison to more modern first-person shooters. This game really kind of, even though Luke and I kind of just ragged on the story a bit, I feel like it did a pretty good job in kind of making a story out of a first-person shooters, whereas a lot of modern first-person shooters are very, very short and they don't have a lot of, substance or length. So I think for this game itself, I think it did really good job. Definitely some parts are a bit but I would recommend it, and I enjoyed myself. So at the end of it, definitely enjoyed it, and I'm definitely looking forward to playing the next game. So
that's a thumbs up from you, by the
essentially, two thumbs up.
I mean, I'm definitely not any worse. My take is definitely not any more negative than that.
Okay.
But I always find sort of review scores fascinating, and and particularly like when you get these really big games. I think of some more modern ones, and Red Dead Redemption 2 comes to mind, Breath of the Wild, games like that. People refer to them as masterpieces, landmark titles. Halo is definitely a landmark title. In my opinion, it took the first-person shooter from, a certain standard to a whole new standard in a good way.
Yep.
In a good way. I do think that some of the mechanics and sort of gameplay ideas it introduced took over from some more traditional mechanics in ways that I don't like. For instance, I'm not actually a fan of regenerating health.
Interesting.
I am totally fine with it in Halo because you have a regenerating shield, and when that's depleted, you still have health.
The actual health, yes.
Yeah, when your health is gone, you are dead.
Yep.
And even once your shield regenerates, your health can get down to essentially, the equivalent of 10%, and you need to be more careful because you might die more easily.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in modern FPS, when it's just regenerating to 100% guaranteed, it makes it a lot easier. And yeah, I think it makes it a lot easier and takes away a lot of the tension and just creates a whole lot of moments where you're like, oh, got to duck for cover and I'll just stay here for 10 seconds. Now I'm good to go.
And it also doesn't make a lot of contextual sense in a lot of the modern games because, like you said, Halo has a reason for it because we're Spartans with an overshield or a shield installed, whereas modern ones are like realistic war shooters and people don't just regenerate from bullet shots or bullet wounds. So,
Yeah. That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. But I feel like having played it for the first time now, I don't know if I could call it a masterpiece now. Like, let's say it was released now for the first time. But I am quite willing to acknowledge that it's a 20-year-old game. And the fact that I am debating whether or not it's a masterpiece if it was released today means that at the time it did come out, I 100% understand why it was called a masterpiece.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I actually quite like the word masterful. I think that is how I would describe it. That way I get away with having like master in there, but I'm not saying it's like the ultimate
You're not going to commit.
status.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
But yeah, it's an interesting idea. I think this is one of those things, David, that I will be fascinated to explore with a lot of different games. Maybe the more games we play and the more sort of reviews and perspectives we adopt, the clearer it will become to me.
Yeah.
As to how I compare games.
Well, we'll see how it goes, and we can just kind of build on it. Did you have a score?
We're gonna build all the way to a 10-point scale, aren't we? And then every game will get a score at the end. Yep.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
I'm kidding.
We'll see. We'll see.
If I were to give it a score, like a personal score, like I often like to give anything, whether it's a game, a movie, TV show, album, like an objective score and a subjective score, because I actually think it's a useful approach too, because there are things out there that objectively might get 5 or 6 out of 10, but if it happens to be something in a genre or style that you really like, you're naturally going to enjoy that more.
Absolutely.
So I think my personal experience of Halo was probably a 9 out of 10.
That is actually a lot higher than I thought it'd be.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I hated a couple of levels. I hated them, but there was so much else that I loved that I feel like an 8 is just a bit too punishing. And you know, I'm also acknowledging that it is an old game. So, but you know, it's like Breath of the Wild had a lot of technical issues in terms of just visual glitches, frame rate problems, all that sort of stuff. That in other games, reviewers would, you know, tear them to shreds over that sort of thing. But Breath of the Wild got so many 10s out of 10. 10 out of 10s, 10s out of 10, whatever, that, you know, it's clear that those little issues didn't get in the way of people's pure enjoyment of the game.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, if I was a reviewer reviewing the game now and it was a brand new game that had just come out, I probably would go down to an 8. Just because, you know, some of those repetitive issues and slightly weak storyline are worthy of a few points being deducted. But, yeah.
Fair enough.
I think that's where I stand.
Cool.
So that's Halo.
Yeah.
Anything else you have to add?
No. That was pretty much it. Had a good time. Looking forward to the other games in the series. Probably won't be something both of us will jump straight back into, but you know.
No. So to the 2 or 3 listeners, don't expect the next video to be about Halo.
Yeah, no.
Unless we both happen to jump into Infinite, but I feel like that's skipping ahead a bit.
I think that'll be skipping ahead. I think we'll be looking at going through it chronologically. Probably not right after this. So
but also I'm always with modern games a bit more willing to just let them sit for a bit while they get patched and refined. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That way we can get the slightly more refined experience once it's running a little better. All right. Well, for anyone who did stick around to the end, thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
See you next time.